And so while I was, instead of drawing little things on a notepad while I was talking with someone about code stuff, I'd be copying a Norman Rockwell drawing or something like that.
Well, you know, in looking at your drawing samples that you sent, some of these do have a Norman Rockwell kind of flavor to them. It's not exactly the same, but it just sort of reminds me of that in a way.
I spent a lot of time reading what he's written, and I don't do oils. I don't have the patience for oils. You have to be really patient to do things. But
so you work mostly in what, graphite?
I mostly work in graphite, yeah. Pencil, because it's fast. And when this was, the Oregon at Last book was the first time I had worked digitally on a book. And
how does that work?
It's all ones and zeros, I guess. What I do is I make the pencil drawing, I scan it into my computer, and then I colorize it. Sort of like what Turner used to, well, not Turner Classic Movies, because they don't mess with movies, but Ted Turner. They'd take black and white movies and they'd colorize them, and suddenly this old movie that you'd seen a zillion times in black and white suddenly has color. It's like, wow, I never thought he was wearing that. But the ones and zeros get changed to some other combination, and you can do all sorts of things with color. And since I only end up getting 6 weeks or so to work on a book, there's certainly no way I can do a drawing to get it laid out and designed right, and then go back and do it again, this time in color. Because I've already used up my entire time just doing first drafts.
Well, you know, that's something that I wondered, like when someone contacts you, who is this Lillian Foreman who wrote this book, Oregon at Last, the publisher calls you and says, we've got this manuscript, we need it illustrated. Sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay. Then do you work with Lillian after you do the drawings?
Well, actually, I worked with a literary agent who was working for Scholastic, and the person that they wanted to do the illustrations backed out on them. And so I was number 2 or 3 or 4 on the list, however far they got down on their list before they called me. And I, of course, said yes. And then after I'd said yes, found out what the terms were, and okay, sure. Because, of course, since I was not their first choice, I didn't have their first offer for the timeline either. I had the, oh my God, how can we get this done in time, timeline. And so that's when I decided I had to start doing things digitally, even though I really didn't know what I was doing, so a lot of it was experimenting. But essentially, I take every part of the drawing and I cut it apart, I change it to a different color, and then I glue it back in the drawing again. And that actually is faster than painting, although if I try to describe it, it doesn't seem like it.
Well, so is the editor working with you the whole time?
No.
I mean, it seems very time-consuming to me to make an entire illustration and have to show it to them, and they go, no, that's not quite it.
Yeah, and in this case, there was more editorial supervision than sometimes the ones I get, but it was a matter of sending them line drawings and without all the shading and stuff, and they'd say, yeah, can you do something with the 2 oxen and the girls? It's just not coming off the way we want it to, and so I'd redraw it. But yeah, with the timelines I get, I hardly ever get a chance to do a drawing again. If I screw up the first time, and that's one of the other good parts about a computer, if I screw up the first time, I can usually alter it in the computer. So the original drawing may have a horse that's, you know, it's a huge horse considering that little person that's riding it, but I can shrink the horse down.
I'm talking with Marty Jones about illustration today. He's illustrated a number of things, one of which is this book here by Lillian Foreman called Oregon at Last. And what else have you worked on?
I've worked on, like I said, about 5 books. I did one called First Heroes for Freedom. That was the first book that I did about the 17th, no, about the first Rhode Island Regiment, which fought in the Revolutionary War. much like the 84th Massachusetts did in the Civil War. General Washington needed cannon fodder and told all the slaves that if they fought for the Revolutionary Army and they lived, he would give them their freedom.
What a guy.
Yeah. And so that was, and that one was all black and white, which was good because one of the things that I had to figure out was, okay, I'm doing a children's book about war. And this is the story of a boy who is a slave and his owners who, unbeknownst to to Cuff, the young slave boy, they're doing double agent stuff. And they're bringing British people British soldiers onto their farm to spy on what's going on. And so they sent him off to the 1st Rhode Island Regiment so that he'd have a chance, because if he'd stayed on the farm, he would have been pressed into service with the British Army. And so then Oregon at Last was the second book. I did a digital book for Yellowstone Park Foundation that had to do with Yellowstone Park and the reintroducing of wolves to the park, which had a lot of controversy among the Montana and Wyoming ranchers. And their 2 kids are traveling to the park to visit their grandparents. Grandfather's a retired park ranger, so during the middle of this digital talk, he tells the story of bringing the wolf back in the park. And it's available online, but it's a really, really long name that I can't ever remember. But it's called Windows into Wonderland. So if you found your way to Yellowstone Park and you typed in Windows into Wonderland in their search engine, you'd probably get there. The